Some cars are so strange they can stop traffic without being fast, loud, or expensive. They look like city pods, jet-age experiments, rolling eggs, or machines somebody sketched as a joke before actually building them. If you enjoy forgotten car history, rare machines, and vehicles that probably should not exist but somehow do, subscribe now. Up next, each car gets the essentials: why it was made, what powered it, how few were built, and the weird detail that makes it unforgettable. We start small, then get stranger, ending with one of the wildest concept cars ever created. The 1936 Stout Scarab looked less like a car from the 1930s and more like somebody accidentally parked a future minivan in the middle of the Great Depression. This really existed, and it was built around an idea that would not become normal for decades: maximum interior space in a single, roomy cabin. Its creator was William Stout, an aviation engineer who wanted a car inspired by aircraft design. Instead of a long hood, separate trunk, and tight passenger area, the Scarab pushed the wheels toward the corners and opened up the middle. Inside, it was closer to a rolling lounge than a normal sedan, with flexible seating that could be rearranged for family travel, business meetings, or just stretching out on the road. Power came from a rear-mounted Ford flathead V8, which was unusual for an American car at the time. The body was rounded and streamlined, with a smooth shape meant to cut through the air more efficiently. It also used advanced construction ideas, including a unitized structure instead of the typical heavy body-on-frame layout. The problem was the price. Stout planned to sell the Scarab for around $5,000, which was enormous money in the 1930s. For comparison, many regular cars cost only a fraction of that, so the audience for a futuristic lounge on wheels was almost non-existent. In the end, only about 9 completed Scarabs were built, making it one of the rarest early experiments in practical car design. Up next, we move to an even stranger machine, one built to rethink the entire automobile from the ground up. That stranger machine was the 1933 Dymaxion, created by Buckminster Fuller, and it may be one of the most unusual vehicles ever allowed anywhere near a public road. Fuller was not trying to build a normal car with a quirky body. He wanted a completely different kind of people mover: efficient, aerodynamic, roomy, and able to carry a group of passengers while using less space and fuel than traditional cars. In his mind, the Dymaxion was closer to a transportation experiment than a product for the showroom. The shape made that obvious. The Dymaxion was about 20 feet long, with a smooth, teardrop-like body and only 3 wheels. It could seat up to 11 people, which made it almost bus-like inside, but it was powered by a Ford flathead V8. Reports claimed it could reach around 90 miles per hour, which sounds wild for something that looked like an aircraft cabin rolling down the street. The layout was even stranger than the body. The Dymaxion used front-wheel drive, while the single rear wheel handled the steering. That rear steering gave it a very tight turning circle, but it also made the vehicle difficult for drivers to understand at normal road speeds. It did not behave like the cars people already knew. Only 3 prototypes were built, so seeing one was rare even when it was new. The Dymaxion promised a future where cars were longer, smoother, roomier, and more efficient. But that future never arrived in this form. Still, you have to ask, how weird can a car get when it is basically an aircraft bubble on wheels? The answer was the 1955 Messerschmitt KR200, a car so closely tied to aircraft thinking that it still looks like it accidentally escaped from a runway. Messerschmitt was famous for building fighter planes, but after World War II, Germany's aircraft industry was heavily restricted. The company needed something it could actually make, and ordinary people needed cheap transportation in a damaged economy. That combination helped create one of the most recognizable microcars ever built. The KR200 was officially a cabin scooter, and that name fits. It had 3 wheels, a narrow body, and a clear bubble canopy that opened like something from a cockpit. Inside, the driver sat in front, and the passenger sat directly behind, one behind the other, instead of side by side. On the road, that made it feel less like a tiny family car and more like a little airplane with license plates. Power came from a 191 cubic centimeter single-cylinder engine, which sounds tiny because it was tiny. Still, the KR200 could reach roughly 65 miles per hour, depending on conditions, and that was useful speed for a machine built around low cost and fuel efficiency. reality. Production began in the mid-1950s and continued into the 1960s, so it was not just a one-off curiosity. Even so, compared with normal mass-market cars, it remained unusual, specialized, and instantly noticeable. The wild part is that the KR200 turned post-war limitation into personality. It was cheap, compact, efficient, and strange in exactly the right way. And if that looks small, up next we are going even smaller. The Peel P50 made the Messerschmitt look almost roomy. Built in 1962 by Peel Engineering on the Isle of Man, this little machine is often called the smallest production car in the world. And yes, this really was sold as transportation, not as a carnival prop or a publicity stunt. The idea was brutally simple: one person, one shopping bag, and the cheapest possible way to move through a crowded town. It was aimed at people who needed basic city mobility without buying a full-sized car, and everything about it was reduced to the bare minimum. The P50 had 3 wheels, 1 door, 1 headlight, 1 windshield wiper, and barely enough cabin space to sit inside. Power came from a 49 cubic centimeter 2-stroke engine, making about 4.5 horsepower. Top speed was roughly 38 miles per hour, which sounds terrifying until you remember the whole car weighed less than many motorcycles. There was no reverse gear either. Instead, Peel gave it a handle at the back, so the driver could physically pull it around when needed. That sounds like a joke, but in a vehicle this small, it actually made sense. Rarity is a huge part of its legend. Fewer than about 50 original Peel P50s were built, which makes surviving examples incredibly desirable today. One original sold at auction for around $176,000, a shocking amount for a car that looks like it could fit in a hallway. The Peel P50 is extreme miniaturization taken to its logical endpoint, a car stripped down until almost nothing is left. Last, we are heading to something even stranger, a car that did not just avoid traffic, but drove straight into the water. That brings us to the 1961 Amphicar 770, a car built for people who looked at a lake and thought, why stop driving? Introduced in the early 1960s, the Amphicar was sold as both a road car and a small boat. It was not just a fiberglass toy with wheels. It had doors, lights, a steering wheel, road tires, and license plates, but it also had a sealed body and twin propellers tucked under the rear for moving through water. The reason it existed was simple and wildly optimistic. Post-war buyers were getting into vacations, weekend cabins, and leisure boating, and Amphicar tried to sell them one machine that could handle the road to the lake, then drive straight into it. This really existed as a showroom product, not just a one-off experiment. Power came from a rear-mounted 4-cylinder engine derived from Triumph, sending drive to the rear wheels on land and to the propellers in the water. The driver used normal car controls on the road, then engaged the water drive once floating. Steering in the water still came from the front wheels, which worked, but not exactly like a real boat rudder. The name 770 was the sales pitch in 3 digits, about 7 miles per hour on water and 70 miles per hour on land. Those numbers made it useful enough to be fun, but also revealed the compromise. It was not a great sports car, and it was not a great boat. It was an Amphicar. Fewer than 4,000 were built, and solid survivors now attract serious collector money, often well into 5 figures. Its charm comes from the fact that it tried to make amphibious driving normal. Up next, we leave the water behind for a wedge-shaped show car that looked like the future had arrived early. That wedge-shaped show car was the 1970 Ferrari 512 S Modulo, and yes, this really was a Ferrari. Built by Pininfarina, the Modulo was not created to make grocery runs or cruise city streets. It was a design statement meant to show how far a car body could be pushed when normal road use stopped being the main concern. The result was only about 36 inches tall, with a flat, razor-like shape that looked more like a landed spacecraft than a car. Underneath the fantasy body was serious Ferrari hardware. The Modulo used a chassis connected to the Ferrari 512S sports racing program, with a mid-mounted Ferrari V12 as its foundation. That link gave the concept real performance credibility, even if the bodywork made it almost impossible to imagine in traffic. The details were pure concept car theater. The wheels were mostly covered, the front end was low and smooth, and instead of normal doors, the entire canopy slid forward so the driver could climb inside. From some angles, it barely looked like it had room for a person at all. Only one Modulo was built, which makes it essentially priceless in collector terms. It is the kind of car museums and private collectors treat less like transportation and more like moving sculpture, and that is what makes it so strange. Ferrari, a company known for speed and passion, once built a car that looked like it belonged on the moon. Up next, we leave Italian fantasy behind and head into American turbine age ambition. American turbine age ambition reached its loudest, strangest form in the 1953 General Motors Firebird One. General Motors built the Firebird One as an experimental concept, not as a car you could buy from a showroom. The goal was to test gas turbine power and give the public a dramatic preview of what jet-age transportation might become. In the early 1950s, aircraft technology felt like the future, and General Motors wanted to ask a wild question. What if a car borrowed directly from the runway? The result looked less like a Cadillac and more like a small fighter plane with wheels. It had a single-seat cockpit, a pointed nose, smooth aircraft-inspired bodywork, and a tall tail fin standing behind the driver. This was not subtle styling. It was General Motors putting a rolling jet fantasy in front of the public and saying, yes, this really exists. Power came from a gas turbine engine, which made the Firebird One very different from a normal piston-powered car. Turbines were smooth, futuristic, and fascinating, but they were also complicated, expensive, hot, and not exactly practical for everyday streets. That is why the Firebird One stayed experimental. Only one Firebird One was built, making it one of General Motors' most unusual concept vehicles. It was not meant for commuting, parking lots, or family road trips. It was a technology statement on four wheels, created to show confidence in a future that never quite arrived. And that is the charm of it. For a brief moment, American car makers truly imagined tomorrow's automobile as something closer to an aircraft. Last, we will see a final car that proves even ordinary city transport can look completely alien. Last on our list is the 1955 BMW Isetta, a car so small and strange that it looks more like a rolling helmet than a normal automobile. The Isetta did not start as a luxury statement. Post-war Europe needed cheap transportation that used very little fuel, took up almost no space, and could be built in large numbers. BMW also needed a car that could actually sell. The company was struggling, and a tiny bubble car was a practical answer to a serious problem. Its most famous feature was the door. Instead of opening from the side, the entire front of the car swung outward, steering wheel and all, so passengers climbed in through the nose. Inside, there was room for two people, but not much else. Many versions used a tiny single-cylinder engine, and the narrow body made the Isetta easy to park on crowded city streets. It was slow, simple, and extremely fuel efficient. That was the point. This was not built to impress anyone at a racetrack. It was built to give ordinary people a way to move around without the cost of a full-sized car. Unlike some of the other odd machines in this video, the Isetta was not a failure. BMW produced far more Isettas than the rarest cars on our list, and the little bubble car helped stabilize the company during a difficult period. That makes it weird, important, and surprisingly successful. So which one was the strangest? The tiny front door BMW, the boat-like experiment, or the rolling UFO? Tell us in the comments, and if you enjoyed these rare oddballs, like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more automotive stories. Thanks for watching this trip through the strangest corners of car history, from the early minivan idea and three-wheeled pod to the microcars, Amphicar, Ferrari UFO, turbine dream, and BMW bubble car. They looked ridiculous, but each one chased a real answer: cheaper travel, tighter parking, better efficiency, or a future that never quite arrived. Which would you drive, collect, or refuse to be seen in? Write it in the comments, like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more rare automotive stories.